Hello. I am at the location of Laodicea. This is a vast unearthing behind me of all kinds of ruins. You can see some Roman columns down here. Directly behind me here, underneath that sort of pavilion, is a 4th century church where a synod took place with a council. A historic council that was a group of regional bishops that gathered. Over here behind me is the city of Hierapolis, where the hot springs of Pamukkale come down through the travertine pools. And over then behind me, back here, continuing beyond that structure you see behind me where the church is the area where Colossae was. The cool springs of Colossae, coming down from that mountain, would come down, run by the city of Colossae, and would make their way through the Lycus Valley here that sits just down below the site of Laodicea. The hot springs of Hierapolis and Pamukkale would come down. And both would end up bringing what? Lukewarm water. By the time the hot springs would get here, they'd be lukewarm. By the time the cold springs would come off of the mountaintops and the runoff and it would come down, it would be lukewarm. And so it is when Jesus speaks a final letter, the 7th letter to the church, Laodicea. He indicts them for being lukewarm. The end of chapter 3 of the Revelation, you can read about Jesus' warning to this church. Here's what you'll find when you read it. You'll see that Jesus identifies in chapter 3, verse 14 through 22, he identifies that this church was one that conceived itself pretty wealthy. It was a church that conceived itself doing just fine, conceived itself well clothed. It conceived itself as one who saw clearly. But the reality was they were poor, blind, and naked. And what they needed was to buy gold, he said. Real gold, in the sense of not a material possession, but gold refined in a fire. Real, eternal wealth, as it were. They needed clothes that would cover the shame of their own nakedness. They needed salve for their eyes. In fact, there was a medical clinic here that was well known, an ophthalmological location here, where Phrygian powder was made and manufactured that would be used as a salve for the eyes. He systematically works through things, how they thought they were wealthy, they thought they were well clothed, they thought they could see clearly, and he says, you know what, you don't get any of those. You're poor, blind, and naked. Instead, you got to get things that'll heal each of those. You think you're spiritually well off, but what's the reality? The reality is you're lukewarm, and because you're lukewarm, he said, I wish you were either hot or cold. I'm going to spew you out of my mouth. Spit you, the ESV says. Spit you out of my mouth. But to spit, we think of that like you're brushing your teeth and you spit in a sink. That's not what the word meant. The word was used in the Greek Septuagint to speak of vomiting. It's as though Jesus is saying, you make me sick to my stomach because you say one thing and you're living another. You think you are well off and you have a good self-perception, but all you've got is a little religious hobby. All you have is a cultural Christianity. You're so caught up in the contemporary that you're missing the eternal. And so it is to that end that he warns them. He warns them. And that warning is a really, really important, crucial warning. I think the American church needs to take that warning pretty seriously. We need to recognize that, as George Eldon Ladd said, there's no condition worse than nauseous lukewarmness. God wants you to be passionate for him. He says that he'll spit you out of his mouth. At the end of the letter, he talks about how those who conquer will reign and those who conquer will receive life from him. You know, it's interesting. We use categories today like a carnal Christian or a lukewarm Christian. Do you know that this text communicates to us that there's no such thing as a lukewarm Christian? That someone who's a Christian is to be white hot for God. Someone who's a Christian is to be passionate for him. There was a man who ministered here in Laodicea, Hierapolis, and Colossae. You read about it at the end of Colossians 4. And you get the context and you sense that Epaphras was ministered here. You get the sense because of the context that Luke probably did as well, of course with Paul, and that Demas likewise probably did, because Demas is cited as one who is referenced in the salutations and who brings greetings. Remember Demas? 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 9. We learn that Demas left Paul and went after the world. Why? Because he loved it. He loved this present world. There's a good chance that Demas ministered here in Laodicea, ministered over in Hierapolis, ministered over in Colossae, and that this Demas, who was at one time a companion of Paul, this Demas who the Laodiceans would have known, this Demas who this church would have probably been familiar with here, left Paul. Apparently there was lukewarmness in his heart, and he wasn't fully committed. I want to encourage you. Let the flames of the Spirit of God burn white hot. I want to read to you a verse. This comes from Matthew 12, verse 30. Whoever is not with me, Jesus said, is against me, and whoever does not gather with me scatters. For Jesus, you're either with him or you're against him. But then interestingly, that last part says, whoever does not gather with me scatters. You know, if you are with him, it means that you gather with him. It means that you're gathering people for the sake of the kingdom. You're gathering people. You're one who sows seed and who shares the gospel. You either gather or you scatter. There is no middle ground. Does your life gather because people see the white hot flames of the Spirit in you? Or are you scattering because they see your lukewarmness? They see the hypocrisy. They see the cultural Christianity, but it isn't soaking deep, isn't bringing up fruit from the root, as it were. That's my prayer for you, is that you will not be lukewarm like the church of Laodicea, but you will be white hot for him. May the Lord bless you. Pursue him with all the passion you have, and let him get all over your relationships, all over your workplace, all over your church, all over everything you're about for his glory. Be one who gathers. Be one who lives for him. Be one who's white hot. Take care. Thanks for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, click like, subscribe to our channel, or leave us a comment. We'd love to hear from you. Most importantly, if it ministered to you or you know someone it could minister to, share it with them and spread the word about these thoughts for the week. Thanks for joining us.